What's up, everybody? It's Dan from SageMathTutoring.com and back with another video covering some SSAT math topics. So let's get right into it. Looking at problem number 11, for any numbers A and B, A symbol B really means this. What's the value of 2 symbol 4? Yeah, so in other words, anytime you see this, what they really mean is put the A here, put the B here, and then just kind of figure it out. So I think my student watching this would agree that we are looking at, um, you know, 2 symbol 4 is going to be 2 minus 3 times 4. And it looks like my student sort of was doing that, which is great. The thing is, though, that the order of operations, also known as PEMDAS, applies, right? So what that means is we should be applying multiplication before we apply addition. So it is the case that this should become 2 minus 12, and that's going to be negative 10. All right. So what did my student do? Let's see. 2 minus 3 is negative. Yeah, so it looks like my student performed 2 minus 3 first and then multiplied that times 4. But for my student watching, just know that multiplication comes before addition. Okay, so that's that one. Problem number 12, if 1/4 of the price of a plane ticket is $125, the price of 5 plane tickets can be determined by multiplying 125 by, yeah, okay, that's very tricky, I would say. Pretty sure that's going to be 20. So just based off of this first piece of information, for my student watching, just know that, imagine this is like the whole ticket, and we know that 1/4 of the whole ticket is 125. Now, what that means is that the price of the whole ticket would be a matter of, that being 125, this 125, this 125, and this is 125. So I think my student recognizes that the price of an entire ticket is going to be 125 times 4, and that is 500. Now, then they ask, the price of 5 of these would be a matter of multiplying 125 by what number? Well, I think my student recognizes that that would be a matter of, taking into account literally 5 of these, right? And if you sort of think about it, that's going to be, all of these, right? This is 5 total tickets, and that's a matter of 125 times 20, okay? Because there are 20 of those 125s here, all right? So this is something along these lines should happen in your head. You should sort of have a sense that this is what's going on when you get 5 tickets. It did turn out that we didn't really need to know about this 500, but we did really need to know that you're going to be faced with this situation if you get 5 tickets. So hopefully that makes sense. And it is for that reason that the answer is going to be 20. The answer for this one was negative 10. Okay, looking at problem number 13. In that figure, E will be the midpoint of side AD. Okay, so I'm actually going to write that. So E is sort of like right in the middle there. F would be the midpoint of side AB. Okay, cool. So F is over here. Which point represents the midpoint of a line segment that would join E and F? Yeah, so for my student watching, first of all, you do need to understand what a midpoint is. So that's just the point that's perfectly between A and D here, right? So we said that E is the midpoint of side AD. Well, here's side AD, and then the midpoint is the point that's like right in the middle. Side AB is, of course, over here, and F is therefore the point that's right in the middle. And then if we were to draw a line segment that joins E and F, that's like this line segment, right? And it certainly looks like H is on that segment that we just created there, and it is for that reason that B is the answer. Now, I would actually suggest go ahead and like draw the points just like I did, okay, and then take it from there. Quadrilateral, blah, 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 x equals, okay, so for my student watching at home, just know that the sum of interior angles for a quadrilateral, also known as a four-sided figure, okay, the sum of interior angles of a quadrilateral is going to add up to 360 degrees. So in other words, when you add all of these interior angles, it's going to add up to 360. So therefore, you could set up an equation that says 125 plus 85 plus 75 plus x equals 360. It's the case that these are all like terms, and then when you combine them, you would get 285 after combining them. And if we want to solve for x, we would have to subtract 285 from both sides, and that would leave us with x equals 360 minus 285 is going to be 75. So that's the answer there. Now, a couple things. Number one, for my student watching, you could simply memorize the fact that the sum of interior angles for a four-sided figure is 360. You could also recognize that the sum of interior angles of any polygon is based off of this formula, where it's literally going to be n minus 2 times 180. Now, the n represents the number of sides. Okay, my handwriting's not that good, but I think you get the idea. All right, so if you're dealing with a five-sided figure and you want to figure out the sum of interior angles of that five-sided figure, that would be 5 minus 2, which is 3 times 180. Okay, so in other words, let's say I wanted to find the sum of interior angles of all of these, then I might not know what each angle is, but I do know that they're going to add up to a certain number, and that number would be 5 minus 2 times 180. 5 minus 2 is 3, so 3 times 180 is 540. So in other words, I know that this angle plus this angle plus this angle plus this angle plus this angle equals 540. Okay, if the average of 4 consecutive odd numbers is 24, what's the largest number? Okay, a couple things. First of all, the average formula will always be the sum of numbers all over the number of values, okay? Now, I think what I'll do is actually replace this word with values, okay? So it's the sum of values all over the amount of values that you're dealing with, okay? Now, we'll just keep that in mind because we will be using that later. It's also the case that when they say consecutive odd numbers, what they mean is, something like 5, 7, 9, and 11. All of these are odd, and we call them consecutive because 7 is what immediately comes after 5, 9 is what immediately comes after 7, 11 is what immediately comes after 9, and so on. So whenever you have that situation where it's like 7 is the next odd number in line, 9 is the next odd number in line, 11 is the next odd number in line, we call that consecutive, okay? Now, you might take note that there's always a distance of 2 between each number, right? There's always a distance of 2 between each number. But it's also the case that you could think of it as that there's a distance of 2 between the first and the second number, but there's a distance of 4 between the first and the third number, and there is a distance of 6 between the first and the fourth number. So therefore, if we were to represent 4 consecutive odd integers, we could call the first one x, we could call the next one x plus 2, we could call the next one x plus 4, and we could call the next one x plus 6, okay? Now, that is a classic way of representing 4 consecutive odd integers, where this is the smallest one, and this right here is the largest one. Okay, so that's a concept that you definitely need for this one. Now, they say that the average of these 4 consecutive odd numbers is 24. So in other words, if we were to use the average formula, right? If we were to use the average formula, well, the average would be 24, right? And then we know that it's 4 numbers that we're adding together. So the number of values that we're adding together is 4. So we could put a 4 down here. And we know that what belongs on top is the sum of values. So we could call this the values themselves. And we're looking at x plus 2 plus x plus 4 plus x plus 6. Okay. And it's the case that you have like terms here. Okay. You have yellow underlined like terms here. And let's just simplify it a little bit more. So we're looking at 24 equals something over 4 for sure. All right, we'll do a little space here. And with regards to this, it's going to be 4x, okay, 4x, and that's a result of adding x plus x plus x plus x, okay? So there's going to be 4x, and then we're going to be adding on top of that 2 plus 4 plus 6, and that's going to be 12, all right? So we're looking at 12 there. Now, we are sort of getting closer to figuring out what the largest number is. At the end of the day, if we just found x, then we could add 6 to x, and then we would have our largest number, right? So we are sort of on a mission right now to figure out what x is, okay? So one way of going about it is you could notice that there's a 4 on the bottom, and that 4 we want to get rid of. And the way to get rid of that is you can literally multiply both sides of the equation by 4. Now, by multiplying both sides of the equation by 4, what that does is that cancels that 4 out. And what that leaves you with is just 4x plus 12 over here. Now, 4 times 24 is 96. And from that point forward, you're going to want to subtract 12 from both sides. That would cancel that. Next thing you know, you have 4x all by itself over here. And 96 minus 12 is 84. And then dividing both sides by 4, we cancel that. And then we have x equals 21. Okay. Now, at the end of the day, we are not done, because once again, all we've accomplished is we've figured out the smallest number, right? So we had already established that x represents the smallest number. So in order to get the largest number, we would have to add 6 to that. So 21 plus 6 is equal to 27, and that's going to be the answer to that one. Okay, looking at problem number 19, at a fundraiser, there are 27 volunteers that need to be divided into groups if at least 5, but no more than 9 can be in a group, and no 2 groups have the same number of volunteers. What is the smallest number of groups required to accommodate all 27 volunteers? Okay, so in my opinion, that's actually a pretty tricky one, but let's look at the possibilities. So we could have groups of at least 5, but no more than 9. So that means that we can have groups of 5, we can have groups of 6, we can have a group composed of 7 people, a group composed of 8 people, and a group composed of 9 people. So let's see, what is the smallest number of groups required to accommodate all 27? So there's a couple parameters we need to take into account. One parameter is the fact that no two groups can have the same number of volunteers. So we can't have like a group of 9 and then another group of 9, right? So they all have to be different. It's also the case that we want the smallest number of groups required. Now, hopefully my student at home understands that the larger the amount of people in the group, the more people who are in the group, the less groups you will need in order to have 27 total people. So I'll say that again. The bigger the groups, the bigger each group is, the less groups you will need to accumulate to 27 total people. So I'm kind of thinking about just starting here, right? And then just add stuff to that. So let's imagine that we have a group of 9, and then we have another group of 8, and so far that's 17, and then another group of 7. So that's going to be 24. So all of this is 24 total people, plus there, but the problem is that there's no other potential group that we could have here that would give us 27 total people. And remember, we are confined to groups composed of this amount of people. It has to be at least 5 and no more than 9. So these are the restrictions that we have. But nonetheless, we tried 9 plus 8 plus 7, but it turns out that there's no number here that could work. So let's try 9 plus 8 plus 6 now. Now that is going to be 17, and 17 plus 6 is 23. But the problem is what could we add to that would give us 27? Unfortunately, there's no number from this list that we could add to 23 that would give us 27. So that doesn't work either. So we could say this is out and this is out. Okay. Now looking at 9 plus 8, let's try plus 5. And what would that be? Well, that would be 17. 17 plus 5 is 22. But once again, we could say we could add 5, but remember, we're not allowed to repeat. So unfortunately, this would not work either, okay, to bring us to 27. So that's gone. So then what we could do is we could try 9 plus 7, let's say plus 6. And then we have 9 plus 7 is 16. 16 plus 6 is 22. And then we can indeed add a 5. And that would do it, okay? So that is the smallest amount of groups that you would need to accommodate all 27. That's a total of 4 groups, okay? So hopefully that made sense. Once again, we front loaded it with the largest possible number because we knew that the bigger each group is, the less amount of groups you'll need to get a total of 27 people. And that's why I always started with 9. I tried 9 plus 8, first, but then none of those combinations worked. So then we tried 9 plus 7, and then it turned out that did give us a potential combination that would work. 9 plus 7 plus 6 plus 5, that would give you 27, right? So the whole thing is 27. So it turns out that worked. Okay, at a bike store, the number of bicycles in stock is equal to the number of tricycles in stock if the total number of bicycle and tricycle wheels is 55. How many tricycles are there? Okay, interesting. So one thing we could do is we could say that X equals the number of bicycles. But we could also say that X equals the number of tricycles. And why can we say that? Because they already told us that the number of bicycles is equal to the number of tricycles. So we could say that the number of bicycles is X and also the number of tricycles is also X, right? So I think that's a good insight to have right out the gate. Now, they also say that the total number of bicycle and tricycle wheels is 55. So how many tricycles are there? Well, of course, we know there are X numbers of tricycles. So we have to find a way to solve for X to figure out what X is. And an equation that we could use is we could say that the amount of bicycle wheels plus the amount of tricycle wheels, well, when you add all that, it's going to be 55 because that's literally what they told us, right? Now, we need a way to represent the amount of bicycle wheels and the amount of tricycle wheels. So one way of representing the amount of bicycle wheels is to say that it's going to be two wheels times the amount of bicycles that you have. And we already know that we have X number of bicycles. So we could say that it's going to be 2X. With regards to the number of tricycle wheels, well, we could say that that's going to be three wheels times the amount of tricycles you have, which is X, right? So that's going to be 3X. And of course, we could add those, and that's going to equal 55. So we already have enough information to solve for X at this point, 2X plus 3X. Hopefully my student watching recognizes that that's going to be 5X equals 55. So we could say that X is equal to 11. And by the way, that's a result of dividing both sides by 5. Okay, so that actually is the answer because remember, at the end of the day, what are they asking for? They're asking for how many tricycles are there. We already established that there are X numbers of tricycles, and we just found X. X is 11, so therefore the answer is going to be 11. All right, Aram lives 5 miles from Brian's house. Simran lives 8.5 miles from Brian's house. How far is Aram's house from Simran's house? Okay, yeah, so you could say, here's A for Aram, right? You could say, here's B for Brian, right? And you could say, here is S for Simran. And, the problem is, though, that we don't know how these are all lined up. For example, like it could be such that it's all like a straight line. And that would, of course, look something like this, where, Aram is 5 miles away from Brian, and Simran is 8.5 miles away from Brian. And then, of course, we could just add the 5 plus the 8.5, and that would give us that 13.5, which appears to be what my student watching did. But that is under the assumption that they're lined in a straight line. But the problem is that you don't know. For all we know, this person is like here, and therefore that's 5 miles. And sure, this is 8.5 miles, but now the distance between these two, it's a little bit less than 13.5 now. Okay, so the bottom line is, since we don't know how these houses are positioned, we have no way of knowing what the true relationship is between Aram and Simran. So therefore the answer is E. So it's this. Okay, so looking at this one. Yeah, that looks terrible. 8 and 9/10. Well, my student watching, hopefully you remember that when you're converting mixed numbers into improper fractions, that's going to be a matter of multiplying this 10 times the 8, which gives you 80, and then you add 9 on top of that. So that's going to become 89 over 10, okay? Now, they want to know, what is it one of these, of course, is going to be the answer. So this doesn't look anything like that. So we have to kind of go on a mission to turn this into that. So how can we do that? Well, one way of doing it is you could literally turn this into a fraction that also has a denominator of 10. And that, of course, would be a matter of multiplying the top and bottom by 10. Let's remember there's secretly a 1 under there, right? Now, the reality is 600 times 10 is 6,000. And then we put that over 10, and then we have that, right? Now, my student watching probably remembers that you could keep the denominator on the bottom, and 6,000 minus 89 on top would give you 5911. Okay, now still it's the case though that this does not match any of the answer choices. But you might notice that each answer choice is a mixed number. Now, what we've already done is we've converted a mixed number into an improper fraction. We converted 8 and 9/10 into 89 over 10, but now we're going to have to go backwards. We're going to have to convert an improper fraction to a mixed number. And the way to do that is you would have to sort of go off to the side and do a thing where you literally divide 5911 divided by 10, and you're going to take the remainder into account, and you're going to take the quotient into account. And the way to do that is to acknowledge that 10 goes into 59 5 times without going over. That would give me 50. Subtracting 50 from 59 gives me that. Let's bring down this 1. 10 goes into 91 9 times without going over. That would give me a 90. Let's subtract that. That gives me that one. And then we can bring this down. 10 goes into 11 1 time without going over. So that would be a 10 down here with a remainder of 1. Now, whenever you perform that long division, you must remember that this number will always be the large number. This number will always be the numerator that goes on top. And then finally, this number will always be the denominator that goes on the bottom. So at the end of the day, we have 591 and 1/10. And that is right here. So that's the answer. Okay, Antoinette decided to put all of her jewelry on sale for 20% off. If one of her necklaces had an original price of $17.50, its discounted price was right. So I would say for discount, things like that, discounts, adding tax on top of prices, etc., I would use this formula right here. And the O stands for original amount. The P stands for percent as a decimal. And the N stands for new amount, okay? So looks like we have jewelry on sale for 20% off. So that's the percent as a decimal. It's going to be 0.2. If one of her necklaces had an original price of $17.50, what was the discounted price? So we have the original price. We want to know what the new price is, also known as the discounted price. So all we're going to do is fill in all of that information. So the original price is $17.50. I'll just call it 17.5. It's going to be 1 minus. Now, notice, of course, I did plus minus here. So it's plus if it's like you're adding tax on top of something, or if you're marking up a price. It's going to be minus if you're discounting, if you're taking away. So it's going to be 1 minus 20%, but that's got to be as a decimal, as I said before. So that's going to be 0.2. And that equals the new amount. Now, we don't know the new amount, and in fact, that's what we're trying to find, right? So all you have to do is just kind of go through the motions here. It's going to be 17.5. 1 minus 0.2 is 0.8. And that's going to give us the new amount. So 17.5 times 0.8. 5 times 8 is 40. 7 times 8 is 56. 56 plus 4 is 60. 1 times 8 is 8. 8 plus 6 is 14. It is also the case that we have 1, 2 decimal spaces here, right? 1 decimal and 2 decimals. So it's going to be 1, 2 over, and therefore we're looking at 14. So the new discounted price is going to be 14. So that's right here. Okay, looking at problem number 11, reflects a survey of students' preferred bread types in a cafeteria. Okay, different kinds of breads and so on. What percent of the students prefer whole wheat bread? Well, in order to know what percent of the students prefer whole wheat bread, well, of course, we should look at whole wheat. That's 75 students, but that's going to be 75 out of how many total students. So you do need to find out how many total students you're dealing with, and that's going to be a matter of adding 75 plus 100 plus 45 plus 30. And when you add all of that together, it is 250 total students. All right, 250 total students. And when they say, what percent of the students prefer whole wheat bread, that's the same as asking. Keeping in mind, whole wheat bread is right here, and that's 75 students. That's the same as asking, 75 is what percent of the total amount, which is 250 students. Okay, so to be very clear, when they are saying what percent of the students prefer whole wheat bread, well, we already know that there are 75 students who prefer whole wheat bread. We also know that there's a total of 250 students. So therefore, when they ask this question, what they're really asking is 75 is what percent of 250. Now, my student who's watching knows that I like the direct translation method to solve percentage type questions like this, where 75 is just going to be 75. Is just going to be equals what percent. We could call that X. The word of is multiplication, and the word 250 is, or the number 250 is just 250. So really, we just have 75 equals 250 times X, right? And all you have to do now is solve for X, which means you could divide both sides by 250. Okay. Next thing you know, you have X equals 75 divided by 250. Well, we could go off to the side for that. 75 divided by 250. There is a 0.0 here. How many times does 250 go into 750 without going over? And we could put a 0 here, a 0 here. So that would be, I believe, 3 actually, right? Just 3. So that's going to be 0.3. And then we're done because that's going to be 750. And then you're going to have your remainder of 0 right there. So it turns out that X is equal to 0.3. Okay. So instead of writing 0.3, I think it's okay to just write 0.3. And in a sense, that's the answer. But the problem is that's the answer as a decimal, when in reality, we want the actual percent. So we have to do the extra step at the end of the process of moving the decimal twice to the right. And in doing so, we would end up with this situation. And that becomes just a 30, okay? Because you can think of moving it twice to the right, and then we have a 30, so that's going to be ultimately 30%. That's the answer to that. So that's right here. Okay. Looking at the other problem, associated with this pie chart. Let's see. What fraction of students prefer rye bread? So they're no longer asking for percentages. They just want a fraction. So in my opinion, this one's actually going to be more straightforward because we already know there's 250 total students. Hopefully my student watching recognizes that fractions are really like a part over a whole. Well, we already know that the whole in this case is the total number of students, and that's 250. And then the question is, well, what's the part that they're asking about? They're asking about what fraction of students prefer rye bread. That's right here. So that's going to be 30. So we could put 30 here. Now, simplifying that, 30 and 250 are both divisible by 10. So that would be 3 over 25. And that's actually as far as you can go with that one because there's nothing, there's no common factors between 3 and 25, after that. So at that point, we're looking at choice E. Okay, if D is less than 9, then 4D plus 6 be equal to, well, let's see here. I mean, one thing we could do is we could just set 4D plus 6 equal to each of the things. And, like each of the answer choices. And then we could just see, like, which one works, which one would make sense. So, for example, this first answer choice would be that, next answer choice is this, next answer choice is that, next answer choice is that, next answer choice is that. And looking at the top one, after solving for D, that's going to be D is equal to 32 divided by 4, which is 8. Now, 8 is less than 9, so actually that's it. That's the answer. Okay, because once again, we had that parameter where whatever D is, it has to be less than 9. So what I did is I just set 4D plus 6 equal to the first answer choice and solved for D, okay? And next thing you know, we get D equals 8, and of course 8 is less than 9, so we're actually done. Now, let's say you're sort of nervous about that and you might want to check some of the other answer choices. Well, you could do that. For example, you have this subtracting 6 from both sides would give us 4D equals 36, and then D would be 9 itself. But remember, D has to be less than 9. D is not allowed to actually be 9. So this would not work because D is not allowed to be 9. And D equals 9 when the whole expression is equal to 42. All of these are larger than 42, which means that D is going to be even greater when it comes to these. So that should help you feel very confident that answer choice A is the answer. Oren is 4 inches taller than Lisa, who is twice as tall as their son Milo. If Oren is 74 inches tall, how tall is Milo? So we could say that O stands for Oren and Oren's height, and L stands for Lisa's height, okay? It is the case that Oren is 4 inches taller, so therefore O equals whatever Lisa's height is plus 4. And we're going to think in terms of inches for now. Now, Lisa apparently is twice as tall as Milo, so we'll represent M as being Milo's height in inches, and apparently L is equal to Milo times 2, so that's going to be 2M. So we want to know how tall is Milo if Oren is 74 inches tall. Well, okay, fine. Oren is 74 inches tall, so we'll call that 74, and that is enough information to figure out what L is equal to. So L is clearly equal to 70, so we know for sure that L is equal to 70. In other words, Lisa's height is 70 inches, so we could put that here actually. So that would be 70 equals 2 times Milo's height. Dividing both sides by 2 would give us M equals 35. So apparently Milo is 35 inches tall. Here's the thing though, the answer choices feature feet and inches, so we would have to figure out 35 inches is how many feet, right? Well, that's actually not too hard. You could do 35 divided by 12 because we know there's 12 inches in a foot. So we're looking at 12 times 2 would give us 24. Next thing you know, we have 11 there, and that's sort of the remainder, right? So we're looking at 2 feet and 11 inches, okay? I got this 2 from here, and I got the 11 from here. And that's answer choice C. Okay, looking at problem number 15, find the perimeter of the shape. So it's very important to recognize a couple things. Number one, perimeter is the length all the way around this thing, okay? Now, my student watching is probably wondering, what the heck? How am I supposed to find the length when I don't even know what this is? I don't know what this is, right? But the reality is, it's a lot easier than it might seem because, number one, this tick mark, the blue tick marks mean that these are the same, so we know that this is 4. Okay? Now, for my student watching, I want you to just follow this. We're going to label all these sort of vertical sides with green. So here's a vertical side labeled with green. Here's a vertical side labeled with green, and we know that the total length of those 2 green things added together is 8. Okay, now let's label the this as a vertical side too, right? Now can you see how that also has to be 8? Okay, similarly, if we label the horizontal sides, we have this red side. Okay, and that's 12, obviously. So that means that the combination of this red part plus this red part, that also has to equal 12. So this red part plus this red part also has to equal 12. So the reality is the perimeter of this is going to be 12 plus 12 plus 8 plus 8. Simple as that. So 12 plus 12 plus 8 plus 8. 24 plus 16, which is 40. That's that. A small town has 2 parks. The first park measures 80 feet by 90 feet. The second park measures 150 feet by 200 feet. The 2 parks have an average area of how many square feet each? So area is just length times width. So we have park 1 and we have park 2, right? Park 1 is 80 times 90. Park 2 is going to be an area of 150 times 200. And we want to know what the average area is. So 80 times 90 is 7200. 15 or 150 times 200 is 3 with 4 zeros. And if you want to get the average, that's a matter of adding those and then dividing by 2. So that's going to be 18600, which is right here. Okay. If x plus y is divisible by 9, which of the following expressions must also be divisible by 9? Okay. I think probably bringing this one down to earth is a good idea. So they say x plus y is divisible by 9. So let's make x 5 and we'll make y 4. And because it is the case, of course, that 5 plus 4 equals 9, and that's divisible by 9, right? So looking at answer choice A, is it the case that we could say 5 over 4 plus 9 is divisible by 9? Well, actually, no, because this is a fraction, And that the presence of that fraction just kind of throws everything off, okay? This one, however, it's going to be 9 times 5 plus 4. 9 times 5 is 45. And 45 plus 4 is 49. Now, is that divisible by 9? No, it's not. I do believe the same would apply answer choice C, but nonetheless, we can expect it anyway. Let's take a look at that. So 5 plus 9 times 4, that's 36. 5 plus 36 is 41, and that is not divisible by 9, so answer choice C is gone. Looking at answer choice D, so once again, keeping in mind that x is equal to 5, and we're going to call y 4. So we're looking at 5 times 4 plus 9 there. So that's 20 plus 9, that's 29. Is that divisible by 9? No, it's not. So obviously the answer has to be E, okay? So we could always put it to the test. X equals 5, y equals 4. We could say 2 times 5 plus 2 times 4. We're looking at 10 plus 8. That's 18, and that is divisible by 9. Now, here's the deal, though. One way of seeing that this answer choice E will always be divisible by 9 is the fact that we know that according to the first piece of information, anytime you see x plus y, you know that whatever that is, that's going to be divisible by 9. And this could be rewritten with the 2 factored out, okay? We could factor out the greatest common factor of 2 and have it sort of on the outside. And the bottom line is this number right here is divisible by 9. Okay, how do I know? Because we just said that, because of this, right? Because of this information, right? So we know x plus y is divisible by 9 because they literally told us that. So it's going to be 2 times some number that's divisible by 9. So if you take any number that's divisible by 9 and then multiply it by whatever, it's still going to result in a number that's divisible by 9. You can put that to the test. Take any number divisible by 9, multiply it times stuff, and it will still be a number that's divisible by 9. Okay, so that's how that one works. In the first round of a math contest, each student had to answer 2 questions. Miriam averaged 76 seconds per question. Jake and Raphael averaged 84 seconds per question. Sam averaged 80 seconds per question. At the end of the first round, what was the total time for all students? So, as you may recall, the average is the sum of values over number of values. Now, we could sort of rework this to say that the average is equal to total time it took, total time spent on 2 questions divided by 2, okay? So in the context of this problem, once again, we can kind of see that they're saying that they each answered 2 questions. Miriam averaged 76, so that was her average, but the total time spent on 2 questions would go up here because it's like maybe she spent 30 seconds on the first question, and then it's going to be plus maybe 60 seconds on the next question. You add those, that would give you the total time spent on 2 questions, and then you divide it by 2, okay? So in my opinion, that's kind of a more relevant interpretation of the average formula. Now, this is still true, but this is a little bit more specific to the question, okay? So my thought is, why don't we recognize that something sort of happens here. So for example, Miriam averaged 76 seconds per question. So we know that her average was 76 per question. And that is most definitely going to be a 2 down below. And then on top, we know that it's the total time spent on the two questions, right? Total time spent on the two questions. So then the thing we could do from there is we could figure out what the total time spent on the two questions is by multiplying everything by 2. That's going to cancel these. Next thing you know, you have 152 here, and that equals literally the total time spent on the two questions, okay? Now, my thought is we could sort of break this down into a nice chart or table. So we could say name, we could say average, and then we could say the total time spent on the two questions. Okay, not the best handwriting, but we're going to organize the information to make it nicer. Okay, so who are the people we are dealing with? Well, we have Miriam, right? Who else do we have? We have Jake, right? We have Raphael. We have, who else? Sam, right? Sam's right here. Okay, so we got these people. Let's make this a little bigger. So these are the people, right? These are the people. And the problem gives us the averages, right? According to the problem, Miriam averaged 76 seconds per question. Jake averaged 84, same with Raphael, and Sam averaged 80. And I think we can kind of see that if we want the total time spent on the two questions, well, all we have to do is take that average and multiply it times 2. That's what we did with Miriam's average before. So therefore, we know for a fact that Miriam is 152. Jake is going to be 168. Same with Raphael, 168. And same with Sam, that's going to be 160. Now, the question at the end of the day is asking, at the end of the first round, what is the total time for all 4 students? Well, this is the total time each student spent on the 2 questions. So therefore, if we want the total time spent by all students, well, of course, we would have to add these. And that's what we're going to do right now. When we add these, we are going to get 2 plus 8 is 10 plus another 8 is 18. Carry that. 6 plus 6 is 12, plus another 6 is 18. 18 plus 6 is 24. Carry this 2. And then we're looking at 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're looking at 648. So that should be the answer. 648 is right here. So just bringing it back, how did we do that? Well, we added the total time spent on 2 questions for each student, and we added that all together. Okay, in figure 4, if lines P and Q are parallel, then X plus Y is, okay, so anytime you have parallel lines like this, first of all, parallel lines means they're like train tracks and they don't intersect. And then you have some obnoxious thing going across. You sort of form 4 small angles, those sharp angles, and you also form 4 kind of big, they call them obtuse angles, okay? So you form 4 big angles too. Now, it is the case that the small angles equal the small angles. And it is the case that the big angles equal the big angles. So in other words, this green angle equals this green angle. We could also say this green angle equals this green angle. We could also say this green angle equals this green angle, and so on. Same thing with the big angles. We could say this angle equals that one, this angle equals that one, and so on, right? Now, it's also true that anytime you add a small angle plus a big angle, you're going to get 180 degrees. So in my opinion, this piece of information and these pieces of information are sort of all you need to know about this diagram, this structure, where you have two parallel lines and one, they call this the transversal, okay? Now, it can be difficult to see which angles are the small angles and so on, but it's always in accordance with this sort of diagram, okay? So how does that relate? Well, let's bring this over. We could say that this is one of the small angles, which corresponds with this, which corresponds with this, which corresponds with this. We could say this is the bigger angle, okay? It might be hard to see that it's bigger, but it is. We actually know it's bigger also because that's 95 and that's 85. So this is corresponding, and then we can say this is corresponding with the big angle, and this is corresponding with the big angle. So what did we say before? The small angles equal the small angles. So therefore, the blue small angles are all 85, 85, 85, right? And what else did we say? We said that the big angles always equal the big angles. Well, the big angle is 95, so let's label all the big angles 95. So that's 95, and that's 95. Well, turns out that's actually all we need to know. We only needed these two. We actually didn't need the blue ones, as it turns out. We just needed these ones, all right? Now, it was important for me to label the double rainbows here to make very clear that 95 represents the big angle. What else is one of the big angles? It's this one, and this one. That's in accordance with this structure. And then it is the case that x plus y is what we're looking for. And I think my student watching would agree that's literally going to be 95 degrees plus another 95 degrees, and that is 190. Okay, that's right here. Okay, looking at this one. 281 divided by 4. Huh. Yeah, really what you could do is just investigate each answer choice. So for example, this right here, you could actually go ahead and add that, and that's going to become literally 281 over 4. Now that is 281 divided by 4. So already I know that that's the answer. So that's the answer. Obviously, it might be good to look at some of the other problems and see why the other problems are not the answer. So looking at answer choice B, that is going to be a matter of getting a common denominator next to that 200 by multiplying it by 4 over 4. And that's going to give us, looks like that would be 800 over 4, plus everything else. So that is going to turn into 881 over 4, and that is not, that's kind of like saying 881 divided by 4, whereas this is saying 281 divided by 4, so that would not work. Looking at answer choice C, that would literally just be a matter of adding the numerators, giving us 11 up top, and that's much like saying 11 divided by 4, whereas we're really looking for 281 divided by 4. Looking at answer choice D, so that right there would be a matter of multiplying everything across the top, which would give us a big number, and then multiplying everything down below, which would be 4 times 4 times 4, which I know is 64. So that's going to be some big number divided by 64. And as far as the big number, actually, it's not too bad. Now that I'm looking at it, it's going to be 200 times 80 is 16 with 3 zeros. And then, of course, that times 1, we don't really have to worry about that. So it's going to be 16,000 divided by 64, and that is most definitely not the same as 281 divided by 4. Okay, so that's why that one would not work. Looking at answer choice E, that would be 200 divided by 4. We could actually kind of work that out right now. That's going to be 50 divided by 80 divided by 4 is 20, and then it's going to be that divided by 1/4. Okay, Now, that would be, if we take into account this part, 50 divided by 20 is really 50 over 20. We can say divided by 1/4. And 50 over 20 would reduce to 5 over 2 divided by 1/4. Now, in this case, if you have two fractions that you're dividing, you do something called keep, change, flip, where you would keep the first fraction and sort of leave it as is. That's 5 over 2. You would change the operation from division to multiplication. So I'll use an asterisk for multiplication. And then we would flip the second fraction, meaning flip it upside down. So that becomes 4 over 1. Multiplying straight across would give us 5 times 4 is 20. 2 times 1 is 2, and that's 10. And that is most definitely not the same as 281 divided by 4. All right, so that is how you do 23. Okay, looking at problem number 24, if 40% of a movie ticket costs $5, what is 20% of the cost of 2 tickets? Well, it would be good to know how much the tickets cost, right? So we could use the first clue that they give us, which is that 40% of the movie ticket cost is $5. So really, if we want to know the total cost of a single movie ticket, that would be a matter of asking the following question. We could say $5 is 40% of what number, right? What number? Now, for my student watching, once again, this is the process of translating. 0.4, the word of is multiplication, and what number is your x? So really what we're dealing with is 5 equals 0.4 times x. You can then divide both sides by 0.4, 0.4. That would cancel. Next thing you know, you have x equals 5 divided by 0.4 is 12.5. So what we've done is we've discovered the cost of a single movie ticket. Now, in case you're not clear how I got 5 divided by 0.4, just remember that is something you could do off to the side. You would have to move that decimal place over, which means you have to move that decimal place over, which means that really what you're dealing with is this. 4 goes into 5 once. Okay, subtract that 4, drop this 0. 4 goes into 10 twice. That becomes an 8 minus that. Make a little decimal here, drop that 0, and 4 goes into 20 5 times. So therefore, we are indeed looking at 12.5. Once again, that is the cost of a single movie ticket. I used this clue that's in the yellow box. If 40% of a movie ticket costs $5, well, in other words, $5 is 40% of what larger number? We then figured out what that larger number was. Apparently, an entire ticket costs $12.50. So then they say, what's 20% of the cost of 2 tickets? Well, here's my question. What is the cost of 2 tickets? Well, that would be $12.50 times 2. So that's going to be $25 for 2 tickets, right? $25 for 2 tickets. And then they want to know, great, what is 20% of that? So in other words, the question they're really asking is, what is 20% of 25? Because we already know that the cost of 2 tickets is 25. So directly translating, that's going to be x, that's going to be equals, that's going to be 0.2, that's going to be multiplication, and 25 is just itself. So at that point, all we have to do to solve for x, to solve for the unknown, is to multiply 0.2 times 25, and we are looking at $5 there. All right, so 0.2 times 25. Now, in case that's not clear, you could go off to the side. You could multiply 5 times 2 is 10, carry the 1, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and then you're actually done. It's just that you have a single decimal place to take into account at that point, which means you have to take this decimal and move it over once, and therefore you are actually looking at 5.0, also known as 5. Okay, so that is that one. B. So they want to know which of the following could be the value of h if 4/7 plus h is less than 1. Well, here's the good news. You could always just solve this inequality. And the way to solve this inequality would be to isolate h, which would be a matter of subtracting 4/7 from both sides. Next thing you know, you have h is less than whatever 1 minus 4/7 is. Now, in order to figure out what 1 minus 4/7 is, you do need that common denominator, which would be a 7. So we should multiply this 1 times 7 over 7. And therefore, what we're really dealing with is h is less than 7 over 7 minus 4 over 7. And therefore, h is less than 3 over 7. Now, the question is, which of the following could be the value of h if this inequality is true? Well, we've already established that no matter what, h has to be less than 3/7. That's what we just established, right? So then we have to compare these and find out, well, which of these answer choices is less than 3/7. Okay, now one way of sort of knowing, like one way of comparing fractions, is you could actually find the decimal equivalent. So for example, 3/7 is really a matter of dividing 3 by 7, and that's of course 3.0. So 7 goes into 3 4 times without going over, and then you could drop this down. 7 goes into 20 2 times without going over, and then you could drop another 0 down. 7 goes into 68 times without going over, but I feel like we could actually stop there. Already we have sort of a sense of what 3/7 is. We know that it's approximately, I'll use approximation symbols here. We know that it's approximately 0.428. Okay, and I got that, of course, by doing this long division there, right? So that's the reality of that. And let's see. So then you could just kind of look at each one of the answer choices and find out how it compares to 0.428. Now, 1/2 is 1 divided by 2. That's really 1.0 divided by 2. And you're going to quickly see that that's 0.5. But remember, that would not work because we want h to be less than 0.428. 0.5 is more than 0.428. So this one is gone. 3/7 is equal to 0.428, but we don't want h to be equal to 0.428. We want h to be less than 0.428. Well, how did I know 3/7 was equal to 0.428? Because that's literally what we just found. 3/7 is 0.428, right? 2/7. That should definitely work. That should be less than 3/7. And by the way, that kind of makes sense logically. Doesn't it make sense that 2/7 is going to be less than 3/7? But in case it's not clear, you could always figure out 2 divided by 7. Well, 2 is really 2.0. 7 goes into 0.2, or 2.0 rather, 2 times without going over. That's going to give you this. You could drop down to 0. But here's the deal. I actually don't need to go further because 0.2 already is less than 0.428. So therefore, we know for a fact that this is the answer because 2/7 happens to be less than 0.428. Or we could say 2/7 happens to be less than 3/7. Why are we insisting that the answer is less than 3/7? Because they gave us this parameter. We actually solved that inequality, And we discovered by isolating H that H has to, under all circumstances, be less than 3/7. That's a parameter that we need to keep in mind. So therefore, these answer choices need to be less than 3/7 because they're asking which of the following could be the value of H, and H has to be less than 3/7. Anyway, I'm probably over explaining that. I think you get the gist. Hopefully that was helpful for not only my student watching, but for some of you watching who are not my student as well. But if I made any mistakes, let me know in the comments, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one.